A lot of people accuse Scott Frost of
being a horrible person. Accused.
Well, or maybe, being a little lax at his job, but I will not accuse Scott Frost of this. Scott Frost realizes when the enterprise and the business that he's gotten himself into is near death and needs a little help, a little goosing, a little something to, maybe remind folks that, hey, over here, it's football. You remember us? Scott Frost conveniently doing an interview with ESPN over the weekend just to remind us that football is still a sport. It's the Jacob Bigelow Memorial Offseason Football topic of the day. Scott Frost back home again in Orlando. And Andrea Adleson of ESPN went down yonder to have words with Scott Frost. Quote, I know I'm a wiser person and a smarter football coach. When you're young, you think you have it all figured out. I don't think you really get better as a person unless you go through really good things and really bad things. I just know I'm where I'm supposed to be. That is, I sense from my partner's attitude that there's going to be some criticism coming, but I will throw out something here to Scott Frost.
Okay.
Because one of the things I talked about in the middle of the Frost regime was, here's a guy who really, in his football playing life and his football coaching life, has not had to go through really bad times.
I remember you bringing that up. You were right. I mean, it is success in high school, success in even like the negatives of his time in high school and college. It's like he carried a team to the playoffs, but the team wasn't good enough. He had some adversity at Nebraska, but he still won a national championship. He couldn't play quarterback, but he still was in the NFL.
He was affiliated with winners. Nebraska was a winner. His time in the NFL probably wasn't long enough to really be. I mean, the Jets were okay. It was,
but
Bill
then
Parcells.
when he gets to college, he's a part of winners.
He's a part of winners. Northern Iowa, Kansas State, Oregon,
and
Central Florida.
And then even as a head coach, people forget he went undefeated that one time with Central Florida.
And one of the things I offered was, well, he's never really gone through something like a real dip in the road. And how are you going to respond? And so for him
poorly was his answer.
For him saying, hey, you go through good things and really bad things. Let's face it, this episode with Nebraska was the one time in his football life where things just never went very well.
No, and I would say in the moment, he did not respond well. And as we'll get to some quotes in a few minutes, I would say that he still is not responding well to at least maybe where the blame lies. I remember Dirk Chatelain, John, formerly of the Omaha World Herald, at some point over the last 4 or 5 years, probably in the dying days of Frost and even after it, he said, I thought Frost would go down swinging. If there was one thing I thought, it was they would fail, or if they would fail, he would kill himself trying to fix it. And Dirk always saying, but he didn't. He just kind of gave up. He tapped out. And you could see that towards the end of his time in Lincoln. And, if he has grown from that, great. As always, it is spring, though, right now. And quotes, I've seen quotes like this 1,000 times from coaches about how, it's time to grow. It's time to grow. And then the season rolls around and they're the exact same person as they were.
Well, as you said, there were many more juicier quotes.
Yes.
Many more juicier quotes.
Yeah.
Juicy.
Since his return, I'm reading from Andrea's writing, Frost has had to adjust to those changes in college football, but he said, quote, I love coming into work every day. We've got the right kids who love football. We're working them hard. They want to be pushed. They want to be challenged. We get to a practice with palm trees and sunshine, and we're playing big-time football. But it's also just not the constant stress meat grinder of some other places.
Yeah, and Adleson added on top of that, where do I have? Meat grinder of some other places? Might he mean such a place as Nebraska? To which he says, you can think what you want. One thing I told myself, I'm never going to talk about that. It just doesn't feel good to talk about. I'll get asked 100 questions. This is about UCF. I just don't have anything to say. Now, again, we'll stop there because he does obviously have things to say. But the part that annoyed me about that, John, was that he takes you to the edge. This is not a meat grinder like other jobs. And obviously, we know what he means. He's talking about what it's like in Nebraska. If you don't want to talk about it, then don't even lead that horse to the water and tell it not to drink it.
he's like an ostrich, and he's like, I'm going to lead you to this desert, and then he buries his head in the sand.
He just doesn't want to. He doesn't want to have the conversation, but he wants you to remember the stuff. He wants you to remember the things that he had to go through.
But could you make the argument he is making this point to say as a way to amplify why it is he likes being at Central Florida?
Perhaps, but if he really doesn't want to talk about it, like, don't get cute. Say, look, this is a different job than Nebraska for a variety of reasons.
I mean, it's Scott Frost. He can't help himself.
Yes, and that's the thing, right? I'm asking him to do something I know he is never going to do. Because, I mean, let's get to the best quotes I thought from the story, and I guess best is an interesting way to describe it. But he added, as I mentioned there, I don't have anything to say. Cut to later. I was so happy here being UCF. We went undefeated and didn't get a chance to win a championship, at least on the field. You're always striving to reach higher goals. I'd always told myself I wasn't going to leave here unless there was a place that you can legitimately go and win a national championship. It was a tough decision because I didn't want to leave regardless of which place it was. And another quote later, I think I kind of knew that wasn't the best for me. It was what some other people wanted me to do to some degree. Obviously, that is entirely about the Nebraska job and deciding to go to Nebraska and leave UCF. And again, he pushes the blame away from himself, and he puts it on the other people, the Tom Osborns of the world, the rest of the state, and the pressure that they put on him to return home. I actually never wanted to go to Nebraska. I wanted to be here the entire time. You know, coaches, John, like, they have a variety of jobs. But one of the things that I remember most, and I haven't played in athletics at that level, not college level, but at a team level in 20 years. But one of the things that I remember the most from every level of every sport that I ever played was the idea of owning your mistakes and not putting the blame elsewhere. In the words of Bo Pelini, not pointing the finger, but pointing the thumb. And it's just interesting because I have to imagine he tries to impart the same wisdom on his own players. And whenever this comes up, he never takes blame. He never says, also, I wanted to go there and I wanted to win a championship and I wanted to lead Nebraska back to national prominence. It's no, they wanted me, and I felt like I had to go there. Like, come on, man, give me a break. You obviously wanted that job, even if maybe the timing sucked. And I think we'd all agree that for him, the timing was horrible. But you can't tell me that he didn't want the job. He wanted the job. He wouldn't have taken it otherwise.
I would argue that the timing was good.
Yeah.
The timing was good. Nebraska was at bottom.
Yeah.
And he didn't need to lift it as high as a national championship. Scott Frost would still be here today if they had managed, to
not go sub 500 every year.
A couple of winning seasons.
Yeah.
And I'm not asking for 9 or 10 or 11 wins or a college football playoff. We all knew that this state was going to give him all the grace in the world.
And it did.
And it did. It gave him a lot of grace through the lowest times since the Bill Jennings era.
Yeah.
And with all of the dysfunction that was rumored and was rumbling behind the scenes.
Oh, yeah.
And people just kept going and going and letting it pass and pass. So I wonder, because there's some stuff later in the article, his time with the Rams, they talked him up pretty well about how he was, willing to do the little things, and he's a better person because of it.
Make his own.
But I do wonder though, if there is still a lack of accountability that exists.
Like it.
Because, and listen, I get it. It wasn't as great a situation as we initially thought it was going to be when he came home.
Yeah.
Because we realized, there's still some folks here that hold a grudge against him for a variety of different reasons. And that they were also going to kind of look to him as being the chosen one. The break glass in case of emergency hire.
The Anakin Skywalker.
And it didn't work out.
No.
And so I understand. Is Scott Frost 100% responsible for the things that happened in the Scott Frost era? No. He's like 95%.
I was going to say, yeah.
But sure. What the dysfunction that still existed in the higher ups, in the front office, in the administration, that didn't help. Having to bring in an AD that didn't want him didn't help.
I was
but
going to say, didn't
again,
help that he had an AD who was in Montana half the time.
Exactly. But at the end of the day, the stuff that happened on the field, that is your responsibility.
Yeah.
Not being there when you're supposed to be there. Slacking off, taking things for granted. Those types of things, just being an arrogant you-know-what. Those are things that help cause his downfall. And if he goes into Central Florida with that same mindset, he's not going to succeed there.
Well, yeah, and John, the other thing I'd add on top of it too is, and some of this goes back 20 years when he's penning the blog for the Journal-Star every week, and he's writing about how poor of a job that Bill Callahan is doing. I believe that him and a lot of his inner circle, they thought that turning Nebraska around was going to be a lot easier than it was, and that a lot of the ills of the program were because Mike Riley didn't get it, or Bo Pelini didn't get it, or Bill Callahan didn't get it, and they were going to be able to figure out that stuff. And he learned very quickly that it was not that easy. And yeah, he also did not have this perfect world around him, but you know what? No coach ever has. Osborne had, it's not like everything was great with him and Bill Byrne all the time either. It's been a tire fire of a program. But for him, as always, to not own up to it, that's why the first part of the story, it's about the growth and the changes. All right, let's see that play out. But the latter half, it reminds me of so many of his press conferences when he was in Lincoln, and it was this person's fault and this person's fault and this person's fault. Well, they went to a TV timeout after a takeaway. Why did they do that? Why didn't they just we lost the momentum? It's like, okay, you're just going to find blame everywhere but with yourself.